thinking about this commission that we recently did last year, the motivation behind doing it was, as Dean and Director of Preparatory Division at the Juilliard School, I'm constantly thinking about how we can help to build a more inclusive repertoire for our students so that they can just see multiple voices in the work that they're doing every week in their lessons. Not something where they necessarily have to wait for orchestra rehearsal or one day in the future. That's something that their teachers are playing and thinking about, that their teachers are encouraging them to play on their senior recitals. And so that initiated this commissioning initiative that we had in the preparatory division, where we commissioned a new piece for every single instrument in our program. And being one of the trombone faculty, I went ahead and took the liberty to say, you know what, I'm going to be the person to take the lead on the trombone piece. And I thought about the repertoire that we have and what voices I think are missing. So I was thinking, I don't want to commission someone who's already written for the trombone. I want to introduce a new voice to the trombone repertoire. Granted, I know you know how to write for trombone, and you've written for brass and winds, but you had not written a trombone solo piece before. And so that was really interesting to me. I wanted someone who was going to write a piece that I thought was going to be fun for young people, because at a young age, something that's really important is finding music that students they find engaging. They're excited about going home and practicing. They want to play it. They want to spend an hour. They listen to it and they go, that's cool. I want to play that. Yep. And someone who would bring a unique voice, who has an understanding of a broad spectrum of different types of music, and also has worked with young people before and would understand the assignment of what it means to write for young musicians. So I thought Jeff would be a great person to do this. So
after all that thought, you thought of me?
Yeah, but believe it or not, yes, that's exactly what happened. And so that's what we came to. And then we sent you a message, and we were very happy when you responded to say that you'd be interested in doing this. And I'm wondering, what made you decide on the other end of this that, yeah, this is something I want to do?
Well, I mean, first of all, the invitation alone was pretty spectacular, coming from a friend, but also coming from somebody who has direct influence on the next generation of musicians. I knew this was a special opportunity. I sort of had in my mind a bit of your vision of what this whole project is about, even before we had a conversation, because I thought about it, and I thought about how, the general canon of music that we prepare our students for say entrance into college and that sort of thing is pretty standard. I mean, for every instrument, there's usually like, 4 or 5 solo pieces that are kind of the go-to pieces. Yep. And they were probably written, 100 years ago. And if there's something that broke through, it's that one piece, but there's just not a whole sort of, like I said, canon of yep. new music. So I saw this as an opportunity to, hopefully produce something that could enter into that canon. And I knew somebody in your position, if we came up with something that really ended up being a decent piece of music, you could make that thing happen. Yeah. And so I was really excited when you said you wanted to do this for the MAP program. So.
Yeah, you reminded me of something about these pieces that were entrance audition pieces, and back in the early 20th century, competition pieces. Paris Conservatory was famous for that. They had yep. these competition pieces for every instrument. That was how they gave away awards and things like that. And a lot of the standard repertoire that we have now for the trombone, and for a lot of instruments actually, comes from those Paris Conservatory competition pieces. And I was thinking, how cool would it be if we could create something, not necessarily at the highest collegiate level, because we're working with students between the ages of 8 and 18, right. but something that suits similarly for advanced high school students in this particular case, things that students would want to play on their high school senior recital or would be appropriate for them to play at their undergraduate audition, mm-hmm. Trying to get into conservatory. Mm-hmm. So we were looking for that level. And so one of the things that we did when I first contacted you, after you said that you'd be willing to do it, was I think I sent you a handful of scores, and I said, these are a bunch of the pieces that I currently teach a lot of my high school students, and here are the reasons why I teach them, because this is the complexity of the rhythm. This is the extent of the range on the high end, the low end, the dynamics, the different things they have to be able to count, their different feelings of pulse. And so I shared with you the various things that I'm hoping to be able to teach to young musicians. And I'm like, can you write me a really cool piece that makes a student think about how to subdivide in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That goes up to about a high C and gets them into the low trigger register on a trombone, but comes from a completely different perspective than anything they've ever seen before. And I'm wondering, when that kind of thing was shared with you, what do those parameters mean for you? Do you find that helpful, limiting? What are your thoughts?
Well, in all honesty, I think that was the key to what I consider to be a huge success in this project. First of all, I can't compose in a vacuum. I have to have a reason for writing it, perhaps a story, a person, a place, something, or a set of conditions. It really helps you to sort of focus in. I'm perfectly fine at writing whatever comes to my mind for the instrument and thinking I'm just going to write whatever comes to mind and have it be, if it's difficult, it's just difficult. But somebody like yourself who plays so well could play it. But when we were specifically talking about that age bracket, I thought, wow, that's a kind of piece that really needs to be in the canon.
Sure.
Anybody can write a really difficult and wonderful piece, but something that a 14-year-old or 15-year-old could actually aspire to write, and then maybe his or her teacher could consider having them work on it to audition for a Juilliard school. That's important, and so I love those conditions. I love the idea of, and plus we got to work on it.
Right.
hand on hand, so that you could say, well, maybe this rhythm or maybe this range could be tweaked a little bit. To me, that was the best part of the collaboration.
Can you talk a little bit about your approach to flexibility when working with a teacher or a performer? Because you sent me the first iteration of the score, and I immediately thought, this is a really cool piece, and these 4 or 5 things don't work. I mean, they could potentially work for me. They will not work for my 16-year-old student who's sophomore, junior in high school. It's like that range, the way that this rhythm is, not necessarily even the difficulty of the rhythm, but the way that it's written. And so there were multiple sessions where we hopped on Zoom and I grabbed my trombone and you screen shared the score and we just went through bar by bar. And I have to tell you, as someone who's not a composer, there's always a little element of, I don't want to step on what this person is doing because they're the creator, and we have to have something that's practical in the sense that it can actually be done. And when I put it in front of my students, they just don't go, I can't play that, and then it's dead. So how do you approach that feedback, or how do you feel about it?
I feel great about it. I know I have colleagues, and I know folks in the business who would prefer not to, sort of have somebody over them. They would prefer to sort of produce the product and maybe tweak a little bit on the end. I personally love a collaboration, like along the way, to send maybe 20 bars or 3 minutes of the music, and then have some feedback. Even when I'm writing for not when I'm not writing for young folks. To me, those sessions were invaluable. They were invaluable because I knew at the end of the day, you were getting a piece that you were comfortable with presenting to your students. Mm-hmm. That you had literally every bar had your stamp of approval on. And as a performer in my quintet, I can remember countless times getting commissioned works where we might have had some sort of communication along the way, but not much at all. And then when you get the final product, you're kind of like, eh. And then the piece ends up being sort of what we call the Smithsonian piece. It's played once, and maybe even played well, but it just doesn't hit the mark. And what we did together over those sessions affirmed that at the very least you were happy with what the product was going to be at the end.
And my students were too. They're all playing it on their senior recitals, you know?
Right,
And so
right.
if we have a whole bunch of young people coming up and playing this piece, and then of course when we start to share the work more broadly, that piece is now in the Juilliard library, you know, a couple of those with your signature on them for perpetuity.
Nice.
That's going to make a difference in what our repertoire looks and sounds like, because this isn't just, it's not a performative thing. It's like no one has, at least to my knowledge, no one has ever written a solo trombone work in the style that you wrote it.
And specifically, I went to sort of an African-based medium. You know, I call what I do urban classical music, and it's because I grew up right here in New York City. In fact, you know, in Queens and in Brooklyn, my best buddies coming up were from literally every spectrum of, you know, and I'm influenced by all that, you know. And so it comes out in my music whether I want it to or not. It just does. And the idea of doing a piece, a solo piece that young people, you know, wanted to play, the idea of having it have different flavors that just weren't in the canon, you know, rhythms and colors and yeah. So the title and the subject matter of being an African Orisha, you know, and the rhythms, that to me is like, I hope I write a really good piece because the actual content is going to be cool, you know?
Yeah, so the title of Jeff's piece is Xangô, God of Thunder.
Yeah.
Which right away, for young people, makes them think, what's that? I want to play that. That sounds,
Right.
that's way cooler than Concerto No. 1 by so-and-so or Sonata for Trombone and Piano. God of Thunder is something that's appealing, I think, to all people, but especially to young people. Your piece is definitely memorable because I can tell you that everyone in the Preparatory Division office at Juilliard knows God of Thunder, and they recognize it. And they poke at me a little bit when I come out of the office because it gets taught so often. But I love that the piece serves this incredible pedagogical purpose. Mm-hmm. That right from the top, I can teach students about this is what it's like to play a cadenza. This is what it's about to have a certain feeling and to bring that type of emotion. The idea that you want to, as a performer, you want the feeling to happen even before you play. And that's a piece where you need to be into it immediately. Yeah. Different types of vibrato. Think about what type of vibrato would make sense in this place. As we think about a very typical classical vibrato, and it's like, think about what the vibrato of a didgeridoo would sound like. Right. What does that work like here? And then we get to the second section. I find myself going to YouTube videos of Latin drummers who are explaining bembe rhythm. And these are things that I can't do with any other piece in our repertoire, and opens up the world to our kids in a way that would have previously not been possible through this repertoire. This project has transitioned now to you writing a piece for orchestra for both us and Interlochen. That's going to happen next season.
Right.
Yeah.
Right now.
You have any thoughts about that already?
Again, I'm thinking about this, you know, that it's going to be students, and I have some history in writing orchestral music for youth orchestras, and so, you know, the first thing I'm thinking about is, you know, contacting the two orchestra personnel managers to find out, like, what are the strengths of the orchestras, you know, because you can't just just write any old thing, and you need to know, like, you know, do you have strong strings? Do you have really, really good trumpets this year? You know, that sort of thing. And so I'll probably get in touch with the orchestras.
You can be, and you are writing for musicians of all levels and all kinds of cool things. What makes you want to say yes, or what is unique about the opportunity to write for young people?
You know, I grew up, again, here in New York City, and I grew up in this environment where I was so affected by many, many kinds of music. When I came to conservatory, I think I had a vision as a young person, and it was naive, that some of those sounds would come along with me. And then I realized that wasn't so, you know. And so I have this very specific desire to bring my culture and and all of my experiences over the years to not only my composition, but to my performing, my choice of repertoire, the people that I choose to collaborate with, that we, in some of these instances have this same vision to, change the color a little bit, expand the color, and the sounds that are being performed by young people.